Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. What made you almost/actually walk out of work? Got laid off from my first job after college, took a job at a grocery store deli to make ends meet. It was awful, but my coworkers were good people. There was this one Dumpy Soccer Mom who came in several times a week to get stuff for her kids and just thought she was the GD queen in the castle. Treated every employee like S, always acted impatient, and complained about everything even though everyone was nice to her. One day, she asks for 2 pounds of white American, so I start slicing and tell her I will have to split the order or it won't fit right into one bag. She says, no, don't use paper and just make it fit into one. So I do, and the bag is all swollen and the cheese looks all effed up just like I said it would. I ring her up, she takes the bag, looks at it, looks at me, opens the bag, and throws 2 pounds, about $16 worth of cheese on the floor and storms off. She later came back and insisted my manager slice her cheese, all while berating me and calling me incompetent and my manager incompetent for not having better employees. I came really close to snapping, but afterwards, my manager told me that I was just doing what she asked and to not worry about it because the woman was an insufferable twat who just always acted like that. So I avoided her from then on. A year later, I got a new job and put in my notice at the deli. I came in for my last day of work and was about halfway through the day when that same bee came in to buy cheese. I asked my manager if I could leave early since it was my last day. She said yes, then I thanked her for being a good boss and all that and told her I would help one last customer. I then suggested she go to the back. She looked confused and then saw the cheese bee and the look on my face, grinned a little, and went back to the office. I greet the cheese bee with a huge S-eating grin. Hello ma'am, how are you this fine afternoon? I want 2 pounds of white American and see if you can figure out how to do it right this time since they haven't replaced you yet for some reason. I casually sliced 4 slices of cheese into the palm of my hand, looked around to make sure no one was watching, leaned across the counter as though I was offering it to her, and slung the cheese into her face. It smacked against the center of her pie hole and stuck there momentarily until she started breathing hard, stammering, trying to figure out what to say when I interrupted and casually said, I have watched you treat everyone in this place like S for the last year and a half. Slice your own GD cheese, you fat ugly bee. I hadn't planned on going that far with it, but it happened. She started to yell and scream for a manager, so my manager came out. The cheese bee demanded I be fired on the spot, so I just said I quit and skipped out the door. Went back there a month later to see people, and they said the cheese bee still came in for cheese and had stopped giving the mess. They also said she stood way back from the counter and would not approach until her cheese was in a bag. Moving furniture from one office to another. I was the only person really being active during all of this. The boss repeatedly stated that I needed to optimize the number of desks in the office. A coworker, a 50-year-old angry guy, was insistent that no desk be near his. Obviously, I tried enforcing what the boss said, but the guy kept fighting me on it, sometimes getting the boss to come and talk to me. All those talks ended with the boss deciding I should do what I had planned to make as many desks as possible. Finally, when it came time to bring in the desk that was going to be next to the coworker, he suddenly wanted to help. First desk, he helped me move through the entire process, and sure enough, he tried maneuvering the desk in the way he wanted. When I tried to correct him, he said this was what the boss wanted, so I responded by starting to tell him he was incorrect. Halfway through my statement, he yelled out the boss's name. Like a GD toddler screaming for his mommy, he just started yelling for the boss to come and help him. I dropped my half of the desk and walked away. Called in an hour later and said I wasn't coming back that day. The ancient ceiling fell in and I wasn't gonna breathe asbestos for $11 an hour. I worked at a frame shop as a designer, and the building it was located in was old as the hills. I had heard the manager mention the bad insulation, mold, and asbestos in the past. One morning on a Sunday, the manager of the store would go up to Maine to see her girlfriend on weekends. I came in to find the floor covered with debris and the air full of motes of God knows what. Now, not only do I not want to breathe asbestos and fiberglass, but I'm allergic to mold. I used the phone to call the other managers at other stores to ask what to do. They agreed I should close up until a cleanup crew could arrive. I called the owners of the company and they stated, and I quote, "What do you want me to do about it?" Finally, I locked up and went home. I figured that since Sunday was a half day anyway, it wouldn't be such a big deal. Wrong. I was taken into the back room by the manager the next morning and told I was fired. I know now that this was because she was peed at having to cut her main weekend short to come deal with the issue. They also tried to withhold my unemployment, but when I told the unemployment office the story, they granted it anyway. My boss had contracted the Asian flu or something, and he was out for work for 2 weeks. Guess who got when he came back? Me. Guess who wasn't allowed to miss work because of it? Me again. I got it so bad, I kept it for a month, but didn't miss any work, I just suffered with it. Then one day, he started yelling at me about being sick and wanting to go home early. I walked out. He called me the next day to apologize and begged me not to quit. He gave me a week off with pay. A piece of lab equipment broke when I was using it, and a glass shard made a pretty deep cut in my hand. It looked clear that it was going to need stitches, as the gauze and band-aids in the first aid kit weren't cutting it, but my boss absolutely refused to let me leave work and was furious that I neglected to clean the blood off the floor while I was bandaging my hand. His reasoning for not letting me see a doctor was that it would make him look bad that a workplace accident happened under his watch. That was the actual reason he gave. At least he was honest. I left anyway, despite his screaming at me not to, and went to an urgent care clinic. The story gets better though. I got a call while I was in the waiting room from my boss's boss, we'll call him Jim to make this story less confusing, wanting to know what happened. My boss had told Jim to deduct one of my vacation days because I left work and went home without his permission, and Jim wanted to know why I would do something like that. I explained that I cut my hand and had gone to get stitches, and he assured me that the company would pay all the medical expenses and give me the rest of the day off without it counting as a vacation day. The next day, I expected my boss to tear me a new one for leaving against his demands, but he didn't. Because he wasn't there. Because he had been fired. I have always had bad lungs, and I did some late night swimming one night before work the next morning. Well, that entire next day, I was slowly developing bronchitis. It was my first job at a grocery store, but they were very strict. My work pace started to slow down and I reached for my inhaler. My boss saw me taking my inhaler and began to chew me out for using drugs in front of customers. I tried to argue back, but my lungs seized up and I lost consciousness for a few minutes. When I got back up, I had a crowd around me. My boss then told me to get back to work and finish my shift 3 hours. Everyone looked at him, and I up and left. I was, still am occasionally, a shopping cart retrieval tactician at a local grocery store. My manager was a C. No one liked her, including the DM, whom no one also likes. I was pushing all the carts in on an extremely busy Sunday morning, working the normal 7:30 to 4 shift. I get a drink as I am extremely thirsty from the constant onslaught of carts, and she tells me I'm slacking off. Trish, we'll call her from this point on, as that's her name, piles on a list of tasks I have to get done before I take my first break. We get 3 breaks, 15, 30, 20, and I try to work diligently. I complete them, take my break, and get back out because all the carts are gone again. I refill my drink. We have an argument. She claims I was slacking when I was sweating profusely in the beginning of winter. I'm pushing carts through 2 inches of slush while she piles on more tasks. She assigns me to start stocking dairy in between cart runs. I can't do the dairy as I'm constantly pushing carts. I miss my lunch break by 2 hours. Once she notices the dairy was skipped, I get paged into her office. After the union rep comes in to try to help, he leaves once he realizes it's hopeless. I throw my head at the bee and walk out after saying F this. The next week, she was fired. I was reinstated. I go to college and come back on winter break to find I couldn't get any hours because I was technically fired because my paperwork wasn't completed. I gave the schedule to her and she must have tossed it before she left. I was retired in the summer because the hiring manager realized this mistake. Being given 3 to 5 tasks is one thing at an office job when you don't have a lot of repetitive work and you might not talk with the boss again for a day or two. It's entirely another, however, at a repetitive physical job, especially if you're instructed not to break before completing X, Y, and Z. When I was in the Walmart back room, I always hated when a manager did that. My job was the same every night. Working flat out, I stayed busy from clock in to clock out, and it was hard work, often with ladders and heavy merchandise. Adding additional responsibilities was a low thing to do and, truthfully, unrealistic. I was fairly successful at combating those managers. As an example, if asked to help stock dairy, respond, "Do you want me to stock dairy or description of your actual job?" If the manager doesn't see the error of his ways and replies both, explain firmly that there isn't time and you need to know what to prioritize. Don't allow them to get into the mindset that you have extra time and can be tapped for odd jobs while still being held responsible for your regular work. Enforce that if they tap you, it sacrifices the work you were hired to do. A good manager knows this instinctively and only makes the call to shuffle resources if it's worth the sacrifice. I had one good manager. When he said to do X and not Y, I trusted that when day shift managers arrived, he would be the one saying, "I made that call for this reason. If it's a problem that Y isn't finished, that problem is with me." Day shift management liked to be about what the chronically 100-man-hour short night shift couldn't get done. This manager had no trouble telling them to either hire him enough people or do it themselves. As a final touch, he didn't sit in the manager's office all night when we were understaffed always. He came on there and rolled up his sleeves to help out, then told day shift to take the paperwork and stuff it if they complained. I was having an S time at an S company. The company was a call center for a horrible credit card preying on the most desperate people. Real depressing, soul-sucking stuff. After a few months, I dreaded coming into work every day. I was a programmer and relied on way too heavily for menial reporting S. I was called on the day of my daughter's birth for this stupid S. My mother-in-law was sick and in the hospital. I took a sick day to be there for my wife. While I was out, they called in an IT consultant to get onto my PC to run some crap that could have waited a day. All IT there was a joke. I was constantly circumventing security to get actual work done and to implement personal preferences. I had a music folder synced with my music folder at home. Rather than talk to me about it, they wiped the drive and did a reinstallation. All my scripts, preferences, and many files I hadn't put on the file server were gone. Even though this was soon after the economy took a dive, I walked out not even bothering to say goodbye to anyone. I got a job that was better in every way within a week. My only regret is not walking out of that horrible place on the first day. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.